Well, how well I remember after 9/11 when, of course, the whole conservative movement became what I would later call red state fascist. And most of the libertarian movement went silent if they didn't become active proponents of Bush's war on terror, so-called, and, of course, soon his all-too-real wars on Afghanistan and Iraq. But Bumper Hornberger didn't go along with that, and he very courageously, and to this day, of course, and as he has ever since founding this organization, and as a practicing attorney before that, has always upheld the light of liberty without compromise, as we just heard. So, Bumper, it's great to be here and great to be with the GMU Economics Club. And as was mentioned, I'm going to talk about economics and moral courage. It must be really painful to be an economist of the mainstream today, or at least it should smart to some extent. In a financial and economic calamity of the current scale, people naturally want to know who issued the warnings about the real estate bubble and its likely aftermath. When private sector jobs have grown none at all in 10 years, and when 10 years of domestic investment is systematically undone in the course of 18 months, when housing prices in some sections of the country have collapsed 80%, and when formerly prestigious banks go belly up or receive many billions in rescue aid, people want to know which economists saw it coming. Perhaps it is these economists, the ones who had long issued the warnings and not the ones who, relentlessly consulted by the media, who should be giving the guidance about going forward. Maybe it is they who ought to be weighing in on whether the new stock market boom, to take an example, is a reflection of reality or perhaps another bubble developing within a bust that could lead to a secondary depression. Among the mainstream, however, no one saw it coming. That is because they have never learned the lesson that Bastiat sought to teach, namely, that we need to look beneath the surface to the unseen dimensions of human action in order to see the full economic reality. It is not enough to stand back and look at points on a chart going up and down, smiling when things go up, frowning when things go down. That is the nihilism of an economic statistician who employs no theory, no notion of cause and effect, no understanding of the dynamics of human history. So long as things were going up, everyone thought the economic system was healthy. It was the same in the late 1920s. In fact, it's been the same throughout human history. It's no different today. The stock market is going up, so surely that is a sign of economic health. But people ought to reflect on the fact that the highest performing stock market in the world in 2007 belonged to Zimbabwe. It is because of a tendency to look at the surface rather than the underlying reality that business cycle theory has been a source of such confusion through economic history. To understand this theory requires looking beyond the data and into the core of the structure of production and its overall health. It requires abstract thinking about the relationship between capital and interest rates, money and investment, real and fake savings, and the economic impact of a central bank and the illusions it weaves. You can't get that information by watching numbers blow by on the bottom of your TV screen. Then when the crisis hits, it comes as a complete surprise, and economists find themselves in the role of forging a plan to do something about the problem. This is when the crudest form of Keynesianism comes into play. The government spends what money it has and prints what it doesn't have. Unemployed people are paid. Tricks to prop up failing industries abound. Generally, the approach is to gin up the public to engage in some form of exchange to keep reality at bay. Austrians counsel a different approach, one that takes account of underlying realities during the boom phase. They draw attention to the existence of the bubble before it pops, and once it goes away, the Austrians suggest that it does no good to blow up another bubble or otherwise keep economic production and uneconomic production and plans going. The Austrians in the late 1920s and the early 1930s found themselves having to explain this again and again. At the onset of the age of positivism, the method that, and this was at the onset of the age of positivism, the method that posits that only what you see on the surface really matters. So they had a very difficult time making points that were more sophisticated. They were like scientists trying to address a convention of witch doctors. The same is true today. The Austrian account of the Depression requires thinking on more than one level to arrive at the truth, whereas economists these days are more likely to be looking for the obvious explanations and even more obvious solutions, even when these neither explain nor solve anything. This puts the Austrians in an interesting position with the intellectual culture of any time and any place. They must go against the grain. They must say things that others do not want to hear. They must be willing to be unpopular, socially and politically. I'm thinking of people like Benjamin Anderson, Gerrit Goeret, Henry Hazlitt, and on the continent, L. Albert Hahn, F. A. Hayek, and above all, Ludwig von Mises. They gave up careers and fame to stick with the truth and say what had to be said. Later in life, Hayek was speaking before a group of economics students. He bared his soul about this problem of the moral choices economists make. He said that it is very dangerous for an economist to seek fame and fortune and to work closely with political establishments simply because, in his experience, the most important trait of a good economist is the courage to say the unpopular thing. If you value your position and privileges more than truth, you will say what people want to hear. You will say what people want to hear rather than what they need to hear. It is a feature that marked the life of Ludwig von Mises. Today, his name resonates around our world. The tributes to him pour out on a monthly and weekly basis. His books remain massive sellers. He is the standard bearer for science in the service of human freedom. Especially after Guido Hülsmann's biography of Mises appeared, the appreciation for his courage and nobility have grown. But we must remember it was not always so, and it did not have to be so. This kind of immortality is granted in no small measure because of the discrete moral choices he made in life. If you had asked anyone about this man between, say, 1925 and the late 1960s, the bulk of his career, the answer would have been that he was washed up, old school, too doctrinaire, intransigent, unwilling to engage the profession, attached to antique ideas, and his own worst enemy. They called him the last knight of liberalism as a way of conjuring up images of Don Quixote. When Yale University solicited opinions on whether to publish Human Action, most people answered that this book should never see the light of day because its time was long past. It was only thanks to the intervention of Fritz Machlup and Henry Hazlitt that Yale bothered at all. Mises was undaunted then as he had been throughout his life, and as he remained until his death. He had made a moral choice not to give in to the prevailing winds. Before going into that choice more, I would like to speak of another economist who was a contemporary of Mises's. His name was Hans Meyer. He was born in 1879, 2 years before Mises. He died in 1955. While Mises worked at the Chamber of Commerce in Vienna because he was denied a paid position at the University of Vienna, Meyer served as one of 3 full professors at the university, along with socialist Ottmar Spahn and Count Degenfield Schoenberg. Of Spahn, Mises wrote, quote, "He did not teach economics, instead he preached National Socialism," unquote. Of the Count, Mises wrote that, quote, "He was poorly versed in the problems of economics," unquote. It was Meyer who was the really formidable one. True, he was no original thinker. Mises wrote that his, quote, "lectures were miserable and his seminar not much better." Meyer wrote a handful of essays that contributed little to nothing. But then again, his main concern had nothing to do with theory and nothing to do with ideas. His focus was on academic power within the department and within the profession. Now, people outside of academia may not understand what this means, but inside academia, people know all about it. There are people in every department who expend the bulk of their efforts on the pettiest